Imagine inviting a stranger into your home. They say they just want a little corner to do some trading. You agree. Slowly, they start taking over the adjacent rooms. Then they demand you pay rent to live in your own house. And if you can't pay, they starve you out. This predatory logic took hold of the Indian subcontinent in 1757. A single corporation, the British East India Company, arrived to trade and stayed to consume an entire empire. The Battle of Plassey was a boardroom deal masquerading as a military conflict. Robert Clive secured the territory through a backdoor corporate buyout, secretly bribing the opposing army's commander, Mir Jafar. When the engagement began, the Indian forces stood still, while a massive territorial transfer was sealed with a handshake behind a tent. The immediate result was the systematic looting of the Bengal treasury in Murshidabad. The company extracted so much gold, silver, and jewels that it required 100 large boats floating down the Ganges River just to haul the wealth away. A royal treasury is finite. Eventually, the gold runs out. But a corporation has shareholders with an infinite demand for profit. Once the vaults were empty, the company turned the actual populace into their product. In 1765, the East India Company acquired Diwani rights, giving a private trading firm the legal authority to collect taxes across Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. They were now the government. Mughal taxes sat around 10% of a farmer's yield and were waived during droughts. The company spiked the rate to over 50%, demanding fixed cash. When harvests failed, this fixed requirement plunged the farmer into catastrophic debt. Those who couldn't pay faced brutal floggings in the scorching sun, and families were forced to sell their children into slavery just to meet the company's quota. When a severe drought hit Bengal in 1769, the crops failed, but the tax collectors did not stop. By the following year, a manufactured famine was sweeping across the region. While the population starved, the East India Company's warehouses remained full. They hoarded the grain to artificially restrict supply, then sold it back to the dying public at wildly inflated prices. An estimated 10 million people, 1/3 of Bengal's population, perished. To compensate for the loss in revenue, the company increased the tax rate on the survivors by an additional 10%. Mass starvation was treated as an acceptable loss on a corporate balance sheet. After draining the agricultural sector, the British turned their sights on India's other economic engine, textiles. Indian weavers produced 25% of the world's cotton cloth, crafting silks and muslins famous across the globe. As you can see in this trade model, the British rigged the rules to protect their own machine-made cloth. They blocked Indian goods from entering the British market, taxing them up to 80%. Meanwhile, British goods flooded into India, facing a 0% tax. Enforcement on the ground was barbaric. Company agents forced master weavers into exclusive, low-paying contracts. If a weaver tried to sell their cloth elsewhere, company men would physically cut off the weaver's thumbs, destroying generations of skill to ensure a total monopoly. The rebellion of 1857 was the inevitable result of this systemic pressure. The people fighting back were the ruined farmers who had lost their land and the mutilated artisans who had picked up swords. The British responded with theatrical brutality. Rebels were strapped to the mouths of cannons and blown apart, a practice known as the Devil's Wind. These public executions were designed to traumatize the population and ensure submission for generations. Following the rebellion, the British Crown took direct control in 1858. This new era was marketed as a civilizing mission, promising justice and modernization through the sprawling Indian railway network. Look at the actual layout of those train tracks. They were engineered like a cardiovascular system, designed to pump raw materials, grain, cotton, and indigo, from the deep interior directly to the coastal ports for export. On the return trip, those same trains were packed with factory-made goods from British mills. This influx flooded rural villages and systematically suffocated whatever local Indian markets still survived. This infrastructure formed a country-sized machine built for economic strip mining, prioritizing the speed of export over the needs of the population. By the early 20th century, the British found that economic controls and railways were no longer enough to manage the rising collective anger. By 1919, the empire began relying on raw terror. On April 13th of that year, General Reginald Dyer trapped thousands of unarmed men, women, and children inside an enclosed space called Jallianwala Bagh. He blocked the only narrow exit and ordered his men to open fire on the crowd. They shot continuously for 10 straight minutes until their ammunition ran dry. Dyer later stated that his intention was to inflict severe psychological terror across all of India. It was the desperate reaction of an empire losing its political grip. The massacre acted as a catalyst, radicalizing a new generation and birthing uncompromising revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh. That outrage joined a multi-generational wave of resistance that finally forced the British out. Full independence in 1947 was a victory fought for with blood and resilience over centuries. The foundations of the modern world were built on the starved darvies of farmers, the severed thumbs of master weavers, and the stolen wealth of a captured nation.
History is not just a collection of dates. It is the story of those who paid the price for what we call progress.